All right, man. So it looks like we got some breaking news that might have actually saved the election for Kamala Harris. So there's actually a scenario in which there's one electoral vote in the second district of Nebraska, one singular electoral vote that actually would take away the election in one of the scenarios for Kamala Harris. So what's been happening is the Republicans in the state of Nebraska have actually been pressuring State Senator Mike McDonald, who's like the deciding vote on this, to actually switch Nebraska's electoral vote to a winner take all as opposed to having the split electoral vote because it can actually come down to that one electoral vote. So because I think in the situation of a tie of 269, each state gets like one vote for their delegation. And so there's going to be more Republican states than Democrat states. So they're going to win in a scenario of a tie 269. An interesting scenario would be, I believe that if the Democrats were to have the Senate, they would get to choose the VP. So you might be in a situation of like a Trump-Walz situation. That would be kind of fun. Just kind of go back to the olden days of like the beginnings of America, where it was like the first guy's the president, the second guy's the VP. Would be pretty funny. But the odds that you win the Senate but lose the presidency are kind of low, probably. But who knows? Ted Cruz is polling pretty poorly. Marcus L. Powell might have a chance. Dan Osborne, etc. There's a bunch of these different options where maybe it could happen. But I would say it's pretty unlikely to happen. The covariance between the two is extremely high. So this article reads, says State Senator Mike McDonald deflates GOP hopes for Nebraska winner-take-all in 2024. Decision creates the potential for Democrats to reclaim the 2nd District blue dot. The Republican push to change how Nebraska awards its electoral college votes and boost former President Donald Trump ran into political reality Monday as a key lawmaker, State Senator Mike McDonnell, announced he won't support the change. McDonnell of Omaha said he had heard from people passionate about the issue who live in the Omaha-based 2nd Congressional District, but he said he did not hear enough to move him off his original position against the switch. Quote, elections should be an opportunity for all voters to be heard, no matter who they are, where they live, or what party they support, McDonnell said in his statement. I've taken time to listen carefully to Nebraskans and national leaders on both sides of the issue. After deep consideration, it is clear to me that right now, 43 days from Election Day, is not the moment to make this change. McDonnell said he told Governor Jim Pillen his stance and suggested that the legislature put winner-take-all to a vote of the people as a proposed constitutional amendment so people can decide the issue once and for all. I mean, presumably if the 2nd District is going to be smaller than the rest of the state, they're just going to get outvoted, so it's going to be kind of a weird scenario of like, hey, we're going to democratically vote against your democracy, which is kind of funny. Nebraska and Maine are the only states that awards a single electoral college vote to the winner in each congressional district, plus 2 votes to the statewide winner of the presidential popular vote. Nebraska has split off votes twice in 4 presidential elections. President Joe Biden won the 2nd district in 2020. Trump won all 5 of the state's electoral votes in 2016. Mitt Romney did the same in 2012. The 2nd district got its national name as, quote, the Blue Dot in 2008 when former President Barack Obama won it. Talks about how Nebraska Republicans have been arguing for years that it should be, all for one. Republicans hold a 2-to-1 voter registration advantage over Democrats, but the 2nd district cuts much more evenly between Republicans, Democrats, and registered nonpartisans, a split that makes 2nd district competitive in national elections. So basically, the Republicans have been pressuring him to actually change the situation, change the rules of the game. 43 days out, they want to be able to do this, where it's like, okay, we do this. And I think that this guy actually was like a recent switch to the Republican Party, so it got really, really close. But it says Jane Kleeb, chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party, praised McDonnell for, quote, standing strong against tremendous pressure from out-of-state interests to protect Nebraskans' voice in our democracy. Nebraska has a long and proud tradition of independence, and our electoral system reflects that by ensuring that the outcome of our elections truly represents the will of the people without interference. So what's pretty interesting, obviously, is the solution is to just get rid of the electoral college in general. It would actually be better if you have a popular vote, even for states like Nebraska and those kind of areas, because if you're a black voter in a red state or you're a black voter in the rural areas or whatever, your vote counts just as much as a black person in a liberal area. And so it would actually be worth it for campaigns to actually go out and go for those people there because the votes are worth the same thing. Also, my understanding is that it would actually have higher marginal utility in terms of how much money you would spend for advertising. Because advertising, the supply is fixed, right? It's constrained. as the demand curve like keeps going further and further, you're going to have a higher aggregate price level. So you're going to get a lower marginal utility if you go into those kinds of like large areas with very like filled up advertising markets. But in these kinds of areas, you would have much higher marginal utility because the aggregate price level would be a lot cheaper. So it would be a lot less money that you have to spend, and you'll be able to reach those people. So it would be able to help everyone. However, the split electoral vote is actually an interesting compromise, which is funny because the Electoral College itself was a compromise between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, right? Federalists like, hey, we want like federal Congress to choose, and then Anti-Federalists like, oh no, we want the state government to choose, the state legislatures or the governors. So a compromise for a compromise, it actually makes it interesting where there is this split vote and a chance for people's votes to actually be heard. So I would actually be in favor of split electoral votes in a lot of different areas if it was pretty uniform, if we can't get rid of the Electoral College. And I know the compact is one thing, but we're actually able to take a look at this here. So check out this presidential map. So here is the possibility of this actually determining the election, this one vote. So Maine's 2nd district is definitely going to go red. There's no chance that it's actually going to go blue. So if we have Nebraska's 2nd district go blue, if Nevada is lost to the Republicans, which isn't impossible, it's not impossible. The polling numbers don't look very good, and Biden actually underperformed his numbers as well. So on those grounds, it is possible that something kind of ends up happening there. But you have to hope that the polls are missing numbers for Kamala Harris is what you have to hope for. But in this scenario where any 2 goes blue, the Democrats win 270 to 268. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because of the way that the tiebreakers work, the Republicans would have more votes because each state gets 1 vote. They get like represented as like 1 legislature basically, but there's more numbers of Republican states than Democrat states, even though obviously the Democrat states are more populous. So they would end up winning a tie. Now, if we have Nebraska 2 go full red, what you can see is it ends up being 269. This would kind of be like the old traditional method of winning, where it would be, you win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, but you would lose Nevada, which would be a pretty interesting one. But this is a possible outcome. I think it's unlikely. I actually think the Sun Belt is probably they're kind of on par, but maybe more solid, I would say. Like Arizona and Georgia, I think, are very likely to go blue. I think Georgia's a lock. Arizona is probably going to go blue. NC is going to be a tough dog fight, but if you can pull out black voters enough, we saw in the Cook political thing where if you just turn the bar up to 72 instead of 66 in terms of proportion of turnout amongst black voters, you would win the election. Biden would have won in 2020. So this is a possible scenario. So this actually saves the election potentially for Kamala Harris because she's going to lose the 2nd district for sure. But if we do take a look here at the polling numbers, for Nebraska's 2nd district, these are the Nebraska polls for the presidential general election. We can see that for any 2, this Survey USA poll back in August, so it looks like it's been a while since we've actually had a poll, but this Survey USA poll has Harris up 5 points in the district, whereas in the statewide race, she's actually losing by 17 points. This one here, Remington Research Group, is +8 for Harris. She's cracking 52, which means she's a strong candidate. Anytime you're cracking 50 in a race, it indicates you're a strong candidate. You're more of a majoritarian than a pluralistic victor, which makes you a much better scenario. This Change Research poll in August showing that Harris is up 5. Now, this is a difference actually even from Biden, where Biden was even here in this poll that was an NE2 that was sponsored by Deb Fisher, for example. Biden was +5 in this poll. So Trump was actually beating him in some of the polls. So this is another area where she has surged, and this surge could legitimately save the election for Kamala Harris. Because in the scenario where you carry the Rust Belt and lose Nevada and all the other states, which I think is a pretty improbable outcome. However, it's definitely a possibility for sure, and just that alone is a huge deal in terms of this literally could happen. But luckily, it looks like the state senator who is the vote who breaks this, Mike McDonald, he has decided that he is not going to be voting for this to turn into a winner takes all. But the split electoral votes would be a pretty interesting strategy, I think, nationwide. I think if you could somehow federally get a law that would kind of divvy some of this stuff up, that'd be pretty cool. Because then you would have people's vote. Like, my vote in California means nothing. It's completely worthless. But, potentially if you break certain stuff up in states, even where it's like strong blue or whatever, maybe you get some kind of interesting stuff that happens, right? Where you actually have to go and compete in these areas that you never would go before, right? You never would have gone to, the NE2, but now it's like, oh man, I need to go, right? So the idea of abolishing the electoral college, hurting small states is false. It would actually help them because there's actually a reason to go out and get their votes. It would be cheaper and you'd have a higher marginal utility of advertising there. And then also that same vote of that black person in the, area where it's already liberal is going to count just as much as the one in a Republican area. So there's actually a reason to go out and actually fight for those votes. It would make things more competitive, more interesting, more representative, people getting their voices heard, etc. And it would just make things more involved in that kind of thing. But yeah, it looks like the election may have been saved by this huge news.